Okay, picture this. You're a teacher. You've got a classroom with 30 students. One learns best by seeing things, another by actually doing something, and a third really needs to hear it out loud. So, how do you teach one lesson that reaches all of them? Well, today, we're going to dive into a teaching method designed to do just that, creating classrooms where every single student has a chance to shine.
All right, so first things first, let's set the stage. Modern educators are up against a pretty huge challenge, one that gets right to the very heart of what teaching is all about. I mean, really think about that for a second. You've got students with totally different learning styles, different backgrounds, different abilities, all together in one room. So how in the world do you craft a lesson that actually connects with every single one of them? That is the big puzzle we're going to try and solve today. This slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you have that old school, one-size-fits-all model, which, let's be honest, often meant some kids just got left in the dust. But on the other side, you've got this inclusive approach, which is all about adapting to the learner and making sure everyone, and I mean everyone, is part of the journey. So what are we really talking about when we say inclusive education? Well, here's the key. It's not just about getting everyone in the same room. It's about ensuring fair access and, this is the important part, active engagement. It's all about creating an environment where every student feels like they belong and can be a participant, not just a spectator watching from the sidelines. Okay, so that's the challenge. What's the solution? Well, it's a whole new way of teaching, one that's built from the ground up for the modern, inclusive classroom. And here it is, the multimodal approach. Now, I know it might sound a little academic, but the idea is actually super simple. Instead of just relying on books and text, it uses all these different modes of communication: visuals, sounds, and even physical activities. It's kind of like giving a teacher a whole toolbox to connect with students, instead of just a single hammer. And this isn't just some fad, it's backed by some really solid educational theories. So, the social semiotic approach, that's just the idea that we make sense of the world when words, images, and even gestures all work together. Affordance theory is basically about having different tools for different jobs. A video might click for one student, while a hands-on project is what another one needs. And constructivism, that's the core belief that students learn by doing, by actively building their own knowledge, not just by listening to a lecture. All right, so that's the why. But what about the how? What does this actually look like when a teacher brings it into the classroom? Let's open up this multimodal toolkit and see what's inside. When you get right down to it, it really boils down to three core pillars. You've got visual aids, technology, and creative activities. Let's break each of these down. First up, visual aids. This is anything that helps make an abstract idea, well, real. For someone learning a language, think about the difference between just seeing the word apple on a page versus seeing a picture of a big, shiny red apple right next to it. It creates a way stronger connection in your brain. It makes the concept tangible. Next up is technology. And oh man, this is where the possibilities just explode. We're talking about interactive software that can actually adapt to how fast each student is learning, or digital platforms where they can collaborate. You can even use virtual reality to let them, say, walk through the streets of ancient Rome. It's about creating learning experiences that aren't just engaging, but truly unforgettable. And finally, the third pillar, creative activities. This is where we shift gears from students being passive listeners to being active creators. When students are role-playing a scene from a book or telling their own stories or making art, they're not just absorbing information, they're making it their own. And that process is what builds real, lasting confidence. Okay, so the toolkit sounds great in theory, right? But what about in the real world? Does this stuff actually work? Let's take a look at some actual case studies and see what kind of impact it has. So let's start with a study from 2018 by Johnson and Smith. They had a pretty simple question. What happens if we use interactive videos to help teach English? The results? Well, they were pretty amazing. The results were just fantastic. It wasn't just that students' comprehension and vocabulary got better. The really big deal was that they felt more confident and more motivated to learn. And that's the real game changer, right? When students feel empowered, the learning just clicks. All right, for our next example, let's look at an approach that really flips the script, turning students from consumers of information into creators. We're talking about digital storytelling. And this quote here from a 2017 study just nails it. When students are creating their own digital stories, they're not just practicing their language skills. They're developing these other crucial abilities, like creativity and critical thinking. And by telling their own unique stories, they're bringing their own cultures and perspectives into the classroom, which is exactly what inclusion is all about. Okay, and for our final case study, let's jump right to the cutting edge. In 2019, a study by Lee and Lee explored using virtual reality, yep, VR, to create these super immersive language learning environments.
I mean, just look at this chart. The impact is staggering. Students who got to practice their language skills inside these realistic virtual worlds showed huge gains across the board in their confidence, in their fluency, and in their overall speaking ability. It's just an incredible example of how technology can make learning feel real.
So, we've seen the theory and we've seen the proof. Let's zoom out a bit. What does this all mean for the future of learning? Let's try to pull it all together.
Look, at the end of the day, here's why this is such a big deal. Multimodal learning isn't just another teaching trick. It's a fundamental shift toward creating fairer, more effective classrooms. It gives every student multiple ways in, it builds the critical skills they need for our digital world, and it turns them from passive listeners into active, confident learners.
Now, let's be real for a second. This isn't a magic wand. The research is very clear that there are real hurdles here, like making sure all schools have access to the right technology and resources. And of course, you need new kinds of training for teachers, and even new ways to measure how students are learning.
But you know what? Those challenges don't take away from the incredible potential here. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. If every single classroom fully embraced this approach, if every student was met exactly where they are with the tools that truly speak to them, just imagine what the future of learning could look like. That sounds like a future worth building.